I'll try to answer you.
Okay, all right. Just go ahead and tell us your story and tell us about your experiences with the Lord.
All right, Michael, I'm an 85-year-old woman who has written 18 books.
Wow.
And I started out as a small child living on a farm with a family that was very religious, not spiritual, but religious. My father had been a Pentecostal, and my mother was a staunch Methodist and very involved with the church. But as a child, I was always so confused because their actions didn't match the words. And then we went to a hellfire brimstone church.
Wow.
And in our hellfire brimstone church, there was a lot of yelling and pointed fingers. And so even at the age of 6, I felt really inadequate, totally confused. And shortly after that, I started to hear voices. And I couldn't tell anyone because in our family, there was a no talk rule. And the no talk rule was you don't tell anybody anything that you see or hear or how you feel. You play the game. And I had 5 brothers, only girl with 5 boys. And I was the second to the oldest child. So because my father was drinking a lot, I ended up helping raise the boys. And again, I'm only 6 years old and I'm babysitting
Wow.
sometimes. And I'm washing dirty diapers almost every day of my life because my mother keeps having children. And it was a time where women didn't really have a choice about that because back in the 40s and the 50s, there was no birth control. I know she did her best. And I know my dad was confused me so much because there would be times when he could be such a charmer and such a nice guy. And I loved him dearly. But then once in a while, he would come home just full of viper mouth and he would say mean, really mean and abusive things. He never hit us or abused us severely. But his mouth crippled us all eventually. And so out of that, uh, we eventually moved from the farm because my dad had very strong ideas about educating his children, and there were no high schools close by. So as soon as I graduated from 8th grade, we moved to town. And the town was a small Wild West town where they were building the largest earthen roll dam in the world.
Wow.
And it was full of construction workers and those kind of women. And both my mom and dad got jobs in that town, so I rarely saw them. I was always out running around with my friends. I had a good peer group. And I loved my brothers dearly, and I did try to watch over them, but it was really difficult because they also had minds of their own. My older brother and I spent a lot of time together, and my younger brothers were very much into rodeo and riding horses and doing those kinds of things. But I had my first drink when I was 17 years old. And for a while, it was the answer to all of my inside pain. I hurt. I hurt so bad at the age of 17 because I felt like every bad thing that happened was my fault. And also, I was still hearing these voices and I was getting a lot of negative messages, which I know now came from a very satanic source. I didn't know that then, but I know that now. And after I had my first drink, I got drunk. Very first time I drank alcohol. And it seemed to be the answer to all of my pain, because the pain went away for the first time in 17 years. I didn't feel any pain. And so I continued to have fun with my friends. I continued to drink, but I never drank without feeling guilty. Because in my church, when I was 12 years old and did confirmation, I signed a paper saying I would never drink or smoke. And I started smoking then at the age of 14, just sneaking cigarettes down by the river. But then, having signed this paper, I never had a guilt-free moment from drinking the alcohol.
Wow.
So then I went on to get married before I even got out of high school, and my sole purpose was to get out of that house. I love my mother dearly. I adored my father, but it was so toxic that I could hardly stand to be there. So I got married so I could get out of the house. And I married an alcoholic. I know he was already an alcoholic when I married him, even though he was only 20 years old. And he turned out to be a batterer. Because he grew up in an even worse household than I did. And because he grew up in a worse household than I did, I was able to compare. And according to his upbringing, mine was all a garden of flowers. So, and that's what we do when we come from a toxic family. We hook up with people that we can compare our lives to. We find people that are worse off than us for the most part, and we hook up with them. And then we can feel bad for them and feel a little bit superior because we aren't as bad off as they are. My batterer was in the service. He was in the Air Force. And we traveled all over, and we had 2 children. And he was incredibly abusive to the children. Not so much the oldest one, but the second one. And I did not have the courage I never saw a woman stand up to a man, so I didn't really know how to do it. I tried my best to stand up to him, but it was always putting my life in danger. And finally, after 13 years, I came home one day and he had beaten our youngest son senseless. And at that point, I said, okay, I'm done. We're not doing this anymore. So he said, all right. He grabbed his gun. He said, I'm going to sit in the garage. If you try to leave the house, I'm going to shoot you all. And I knew that he would. So, but in the meantime, I had talked to my brother. I had several brothers, and they really cared about me, and they didn't want me to be in that situation, but they couldn't tell me how to get out. And my one brother was really there to help me a lot. My youngest brother, he had said to me just before this happened, he said to me, I'm not going to help you anymore because you're not getting out. You're just letting him do this and you're not helping yourself. And so I'm done helping you. Well, a whole lot of things happened at this point. Shortly after my husband threatened our lives, my youngest brother rode a bull in a rodeo and was killed. And that was the last conversation we had, which is, I'm not going to help you if you don't help yourself. And so I decided I'm going to get a divorce. If he kills me, he kills me. And when I got it, God sent, and I didn't believe in God at this point. As far as I was concerned, there was no God. And I even went around saying God is dead to everybody who would listen, because I just was so sure he didn't care about me. Then my husband was out of the house. We were trying to live on my meager salary, which was like 50 cents an hour, and a man came and knocked on my door, actually came to my work, and he said, I'm from social services and I want to help you. Well, in my family, you didn't take help from the government or social services. That made you less than dirt.
Wow.
So I said, no, thank you. He said, listen, you be in my office tomorrow at 4 o'clock because I need to talk to you. And I said, okay. So 4 o'clock came, I didn't go. I went home. And when I got home, the electricity was off because I couldn't pay the light bill. And there came a knock on the door and it was him. And he said, either you let me help you or I'm taking your children right now. And I said, okay, I'll be there. So I went there, but it was so hard to swallow my pride and let him help me. But he signed me up for welfare and he put me on this program that got me into college, paid my tuition to college. And I don't know, during college, there were a lot of times my better showed up and I would just bite the bullet and swallow my pride and say, oh, nobody but you could show up at 2 a.m. How did you do this? You're so wonderful. Until finally he met someone else. And that's my very first book.
Wow. Wow. That, oh, that's a lot. That's a lot. Wow. 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 Okay. Okay. That's really interesting.
Well, then I went on. I finished college, but I was still drinking. And I got married again, and it worked for a while. But the problem, I mean, he had his problems certainly, but the problem was with me and my toxic upbringing and all of the things I had to overcome and my drinking. And eventually God intervened in my life and helped me. He sent me another child with my second husband. And that was an incredible gift because I had to stop drinking then for a while because I was in bed for 3 months trying to keep my other child alive. I kept threatening to lose him, but I didn't. Then one night, and this is in my book too, my last book. When I'm in bed, I feel this enveloping force covering my body. And it is satanic. And it is telling me to kill people. And I am terrified and I am afraid to sleep for fear I will do something in my sleep and not be able to stop myself. And I live with that. I go to counselors, but they don't take me seriously. In fact, the very first counselor I told this story kicked me out of his office, said he thought I was trying to ruin his career, and he threw me out. And then after that, I went to other counselors and they just sort of laughed at me. And, there was a whole lot of things. First of all, back in the 60s, nobody talked about God. I mean, it was just kind of a Jesus freak kind of time in my life. And therapists, for sure, didn't say much about God. Anyway, to make a long story short, I ended up in treatment. I ended up after treatment finding a minister that I worked with for 2 years who helped me find God. But I also went to every single workshop I could find on family of origin issues And Virginia Satir, who is a really famous family therapist, stepped out and helped me learn how to deal with my family of origin. And God just kept putting wonderful people in my life, time after time after time. When I am desperate, somebody wonderful shows up, and
Wow.
I'm not giving him any credit. But eventually I realized, yeah, this is not accidental. This is God. So, and that is one of my books. I have a whole series of books on this story, and it starts from when I was little and goes clear up into almost recently. But at a time when I was really desperate, I mean, I wasn't drinking, I was going to meetings, I was doing things to protect myself, but I still had this huge empty hole in my gut and nothing could fill it up. And I had been filling it up with alcohol. And once I gave up my alcohol, I was just really lost. I didn't know how to fill it up. I didn't know what to do. And all this time, Michael, I am working in treatment centers. And I am working with other families, and I am helping children understand addiction and how they've been affected. But I'm not talking much about God because I don't know him. So then a friend came and she said, there's a wonderful workshop coming up on satanic ritual abuse. And we're going, she and some friends are going. And she said, you should go with us. Well, I didn't want to know anything about satanic ritual abuse, but I thought I need some CEUs. I need some credits for my counselor's license, so I will go. And I couldn't afford to fly. They were going to fly and I couldn't afford to. So I said, okay, if you drive, I'll help pay for the gas, because I knew I was safe then. They wouldn't do that. Well, she calls me back and says, we're driving.
Oh,
You get to go.
how about that one? Okay.
So I meet this wonderful guy. His name is Dr. Ed Smith. And he does satanic ritual abuse workshops, or did then. I don't believe he does that anymore. But I learned so much about satanic ritual abuse. And actually, I went to that workshop. Then I went to another one. And then he had a week-long workshop training for counselors, and they could bring their clients. So I invited one of my clients to go. And when it came right down to it, I didn't really want to go. And I thought, I don't want to go. I'm tired. I'm doing all this stuff, and I really don't have time. But I had to go now because I'd already invited my client. So God takes care of me every step of the way. And as I look back and as I'm writing these books, I can see where he was there all of the time. So then we went to this workshop, and Ed was doing something, and all of a sudden I start doing and saying the most stupid and insane things, and I'm just being a jerk, and I don't even know why I'm doing it or what I'm saying. And so he calls me out to the middle of the room, and he asked two ministers to come up and pray with him. And it was quite an ordeal, but eventually he removed a couple of demons. And that sounds far-fetched. You had to be there. It wasn't far-fetched. So the next day after that happened was the first time in my life I was full. My stomach wasn't empty anymore. My head had such a change in attitude. You couldn't even believe what just happened. And I couldn't believe it. And I kept walking around. It's like I'm missing something. It's like I kept looking over my shoulder. Did I lose something? Did I leave something behind? Because yes, I did leave something behind. And when I wrote this book, I definitely put that in there, even feeling like I might be subject to a lot of hoots and hollers and that kind of thing. I was absolutely as honest as I could be with my own behavior and with what happened to me, because I felt like God was telling me, do this, because there are a lot of people that can benefit. And the fact is, there are many, many addicts out there who are running from demons or who have been taken over.
Well,
And because
all these books are about just your life and your experience this war you've been, right?
I didn't hear you, Michael.
So all these books are about you overcoming spiritual warfare.
Everything is about me, yes.
Wow, that's amazing. That is amazing. Wow, that's a lot.
He gave me a huge life, an incredible life. And I feel like I've been a counselor now for over 35 years. I've worked with many, many people. And I feel like he put me through all these experiences so that I could help others walk the walk through their experiences. And I'm forgot what I was going to say. I had one other conversation with God once the book was done, and it was taking every dime I had to get it out there. I didn't try to have it published because I wanted it out there, and I knew that a publisher would change it or fix it or maybe take 3 or 4 years. So I was talking with God then one day, and it was like all of a sudden I am overcome with feelings of I'm exposed. People will see me for who I really am. This is really, really frightening. God, I don't want to do this. I'm sorry I did it. And he said to me, you think this book is about you, but it isn't. It's about me. And that was the peace that I needed to continue what I'm doing.
Wow, wow. Well, the Bible says, tell the Jesus has done for you. And you
I'm,
did exactly what it says. It says, tell the world what he's done.
I can't hear you, but
Yeah, the Bible says, tell people what God has done for you. And that's what you did.
yes,
Yep,
I want them to know him.
yep.
And because I want them to know him, that's the only way I know to share. And so I'm having this book turned into an audiobook.
Okay.
My hope is that it will reach younger people who no longer read. I would also like to put it in prisons and women's shelters and places where a lot of people can't read,
Right, right, right.
but can hear. So that's my goal. Hopefully the audiobook will be done in a month or so, and it will be available.
Okay, wow, that's powerful. That is extremely powerful. So many people same thing, but they just don't ever reach out to anybody.
Well, who's going to listen? That was
Yeah,
my problem.
yeah, that's true. That's true.
And so the hardest thing is to find. I went to counselors. I went to many, many, many counselors. One even invited me to commit suicide, which, as I believe strongly, is a satanic influence there. That And everything that could happen with this book to stop it from being published has happened.
Wow.
Even right down to our being delayed today.
Yeah, something going on. It's weird that Zoom decided to update. The moment I wanted to talk to you, I said, "Oh man, what's going on here?"
I know. And I wasn't surprised because it just continues to happen. But I'm gonna keep plugging away, Michael.
Make sure I share your story with everybody I can, because it's a story people hear about. Because so many people are under spiritual and they're not talking about it. They won't say anything about it, and they don't even trust it sometimes. So you got 18 books that you have released, right? 18 books.
Yes.
Wow, wow. And are there continuation, or are we different topics, or stick around the same topic every year?
They're all on addiction. Most of them are on how to recognize alcoholism and codependency, what to do if you find yourself in it. A lot of them are just smaller, like pamphlets to help people on their path. I wrote a book 40 years ago that is still in print and still selling well, and that's called Detachment. And the Detachment book is how to live in a toxic home.
Wow.
And it's actually sold by Hazelden, and it has been selling for all of these years. So people need it, obviously.
Yes, I believe that. Now, so many of our youth and some of our old to have light on drugs to numb pain, escape reality, or run from God.
I'm sorry, Michael, I can't hear you.
Yeah, we look a lot of our youth are on drugs, and drugs seem to keep popping back up in each generation. And a lot of people are using drugs to hide from reality and not reality. Going up with all a lot of drugs are used.
I still didn't hear you, but
Yeah, I can hear you now, though. Yeah.
my goal, Michael, in coming on this show is to let people know that this is available and that there is help and that God does love them. And I am living proof.
That's an awesome testimony. Awesome testimony. That's the kind of things that believers and non-believers well need to hear, that there's hope.
I'd be happy to mail you a book.
I'm definitely okay. I'll give you my address so you can help me with it. I can take a look at it and read it. That would be a blessing for me this Christmas.
And I also am trying to put it in churches. So if there's clergymen listening to you that want to read this book, if they reach out to me on email or Facebook, I do have a website. It's www.evelynlighty.com. And the link to the book is on there. And my email is on there.
So email all that stuff to my email address, and I'll make sure all that stuff gets out when I release this episode.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
Okay. With that being said, do you have any encouraging words for my audience before we end this episode?
The encouraging words are don't give up. The reason that I'm here and I'm able to talk to you is because God put something in me that kept me going, even though I wanted to stop, even though there were times I couldn't go any further. When those times came, He would put someone in my life that would give me just a little bit of hope, and I would keep going on. And so I would say, if you're working with an addict or an alcoholic, don't give up on them. Help them to know the love of Jesus. Just tell them. Nobody ever told me that. In all my growing up years and all my church experience, I never heard Jesus loves you in a way that I could hear it. I'm sure somebody said it, but it wasn't said in a way that I could hear it. And many families now are living with drug addicted children or alcoholic children, and they don't know what to do. And I get a lot of calls about that. And I am willing to answer calls. I am willing to answer questions and help as much as I can.
Evelyn, thank you for being on Clear Talk About Podcast. You have definitely blessed this show. And I'm going to contact some of my resources and see if they can get some of those in their ministry.
That would be awesome, Michael. Thank you so much.
That being said, I'm going to keep you in my prayers. You have an awesome Christmas, and I'm sure God's going to continue blessing you. And thank you for being on the talk.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it so much.
You have a blessed day.